Revived Thoughts is a production of Revive Studios.
This is Troy and Joel, and you're listening to Revive Thoughts.
My lords and gentlemen of the two houses of Parliament, the weight of the matters and interests that I have brought us together presses so heavily upon me that I could not, in good conscience, remain silent.
Every episode, we bring you a different voice from history and a sermon that they delivered. Today, we're going to a sermon that was preached in front of Parliament in London in 1657 by Oliver Cromwell. Troy, I did not know Oliver Cromwell talked about Jesus. He talked about the Bible. I knew of Cromwell from British history, but that was about it. This is seeing him intersect with Revive Thoughts is kind of neat.
So he's not a preacher in the sense of that. So if you're listening for only sermons, you'll have to exclude this episode. However, his speeches that he gives are just littered with Bible references. And it's very clear that whether you agree with him or not, he thinks that what he's doing is for biblical reasons. So for those reasons, Cromwell kind of is in an interesting spot in the Revived Thoughts paradigm. And so I always like interesting guys like that. Another sermon that I have is actually, I believe it is an actual sermon, is by Constantine from the old Roman days. So I mean, there's a few of those speeches that are so, and we've had many of them actually. We've covered many speeches throughout the years, graduating speeches at medical students, things like that, where it's so biblical, it is basically a sermon too. So it's interesting to see. Cromwell is a contentious guy. People have divisive opinions on him. Do know that I am an American, so my views on him are not personal. I know that he is related to America's, founding, the terms of many Americans are from Britain, blah, blah, blah. But it's not a personal thing there for me. So if you have very strong feelings on Cromwell, you probably would have been better off sending those feelings 350 years ago because he's been dead a while. So not much we can do about that. Joel, let's read some comments and then get into this. On Spotify, there is this person told us on our recent deep dive on the Knights Templar, Follow the Knights Templar, which is part 2. Many of you like that. Glad you're enjoying it. I can officially say I'm cracking on the next deep dive. It is on a subject that I think you will enjoy. It is very interesting, but we'll come to that later. Here we go. There is a show called Nightfall, ran for 2 seasons on History Channel, and he says started, but I think it starred Mark Hamill of all people. Oh. And I guess that's for the deep dive on the Knights Templar. So I think I mentioned on the show, I don't know too many Knights Templar TV shows. And so Sam was giving us one of those. Thank you very much, Sam, for that. I will say, I don't keep up with my History Channel TV shows. I don't have TV, so there's that. But also, I remember History Channel being a bunch of alien stuff at, on the TV channel when you're flipping through in the middle of the night. And I don't remember much else from History Channel. So I guess for me, I'd have never really thought of it as a place to go for TV. Joel, do you watch a lot of History Channel, or do you watch a lot of History Channel?
I mean, not on cable network History Channel, but they do make the reality show called Alone, where people survive in the wilderness.
That's from them? I thought that was Discovery Channel.
No, that's History.
Wait, what does that have to do with history? History Channel.
I have no idea. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm just saying History Channel makes Alone, and I like Alone. So,
Alone is a popular show. So you might be a listener and be watching that. I personally, I don't know. I try to watch a little bit of one of the seasons after your recommendation and several other people's. And I gotta say, I was just a person was just sitting there. I was like, I'm just gonna starve and see if I can outstarve the other person. And then they didn't do anything. And I was watching, I was like, I'm just watching a person starve to death. This is depressing.
Peak entertainment. That's Alone for you.
If you've never watched Alone, you don't know what it is. That's probably the weirdest advertisement for it. If you're a big fan, you're probably like, okay, Troy, there's a lot more going on there than that. But that's just what it felt like. And I don't want to say that it reminded me of a Coliseum. You're just watching a person die for entertainment. That's not what was happening. The guy didn't die. There were medical teams available. But I was like, I feel uncomfortably too close to that for me. So anyway, but yeah, I did not know that was made by History Channel. So there you go. History Channel's got some great shows. Alone and apparently Nightfall. Nightfall, not spelled nightfall as in like it is the night getting late fall, but night as in like knight, K and nightfall. So that's a clever wordplay there. So there you go. If you like Crusader, first listen to our deep dive on the Knights Templars, part 1 and 2. Then sign up for Patreon. Listen to our first Crusade, episode. Then go check out History Channel, I guess. All right, another email we got. Oh, this is from Dave. I won't read the whole thing. But Dave, really nice guy. He read some sermons for us a long time ago, and he asked for a catalog of sermons from us that he's using in a teaching position that he has overseas. So really, really cool. He's and I sent him a batch of those. So yeah, if you are a listener and you ever want a sermon for teaching material or something like that, we don't charge. You feel free to send an email, or maybe you just want to listen to a sermon. You're like, hey, we used to put them on our website for free, but it was just a lot of work to put all those sermons up there, and I stopped doing that because a lot of the sermon transcripts kind of get uploaded by Red Circle. But we have the actual sermons as documents as well. So if you ever want to read those, especially, nothing would make me happier than Bible teachers and college professors around the world start using these sermons to their students. I've used them in my own classroom. It does work. It is effective. Students reading a sermon by these guys, especially with a little bit of explanation for it, it is powerful. I can recently gave a sermon by Martin Luther on righteousness and justification. I had so many students writing. I had never heard it put so clearly before. I understand better justification because of it. I had sermons reading the Jan Hus sermon that hasn't even come out yet that you guys will hopefully get soon. They were blown away by it. It was powerful for them. So yeah, if you listen to an episode and you work with people, young people, old people, whoever, and you wanna get one, let me know. We'd be happy. I'd be happy to try and find. I don't have every single sermon still in the drive. Some of them have been just kind of lost through time, or people, we never had them, things like that. But if I can, I will get it to you because I really want this in the hands of as many people as possible. Ryle on Spotify left us a comment about Henry Grattan Guinness, and he said, "This fella is fantastic. It'd be wonderful to hear him again. Many thanks for all that you do." And so we're happy that you listened and enjoyed that episode. I had another one too. An email came in, just a little clip from it. I took out. We read the whole email, but I'm taking this part out. All in all, I enjoy your show and look forward to hearing the wonderful preaching interspersed with the thought-provoking discussions. May God bless your efforts. Thank you so much for sending the email. So very kind comments, thoughts, etc. from all of you, and we really appreciate those. It is encouraging. Please leave some more. Especially, I love email. I will never say no to emails. So please reach out and contact us. Nothing better than hearing from you. But if you leave a public comment on Spotify or on social media, those are even, and tag us, those are even better because other people can see them, and that can help get the word out too.
Okay, Oliver Cromwell, arguably one of the most important people in British history, controversial people in British history. Winston Churchill called him a military dictator. Some of the Puritans saw him as like a great Christian that ruled well. Others, they disagree with his actions, but they thought they were understandable. And others just saw him as like a completely illegitimate tyrant. So that's kind of all. Going into this, I did not know how controversial Cromwell was as kind of just a layman American here. If you are a UK listener, I am curious. Like, write revivethoughts@gmail.com. Write in and tell us, like, in your pocket of society, in your community, what is like the view on Cromwell? Do people like him? Do people hate him? Do people not care about him? Because I am, I suppose, more confused now than I feel like I was a year ago about Mr. Cromwell. But we'll get into a little bit of his life here. Born in the year 1599. Into a family that was wealthy and aristocratic, but he was like a middle child, and so he was not the most important family member in the family. He has this quote where he says, "I was by birth a gentleman, living neither in considerable height nor yet in obscurity." Just kind of existing there in the middle is how he kind of frames his life there. He was one of 10 kids. Again, he was the middle one. He was the fifth of 10 children. And one notable aspect of his earlier life is that when he went to what they called college then, we would kind of refer to it as high school now. When he went to college, it was a school that was recently founded by Puritans, and they taught Puritan theology there and Puritan beliefs. In the greater scheme of Cromwell's life, that is something that probably plays a big factor in his future beliefs and his approach to how things were ruled in England. He didn't end up being able to finish his schooling after his father's death. He ended up going back to help take care of his sisters and his mother. For a time, he tried to get into one of the big inns, quote inns.
So that's so apparently there are 4 inns, like London's Inn and different things. It's like a society, a networking thing. I don't really even know
Club? Networking club?
Yeah, I don't know what the modern equivalent of it is, because it seemed like you got maybe taught a little bit there too.
Yeah.
Back in the 1600s, everyone would know what that is. And at the same time, it meant he was an important person. It was like he's getting into a club. Social club is the best thing I can say it, but it's like there were 4 of them, and they helped. They were so I don't know. Maybe he
was
around.
trying to
I'm
network with high-end people.
Yes,
is how
and
I
the fact that he could even get into it is a good sign for him. That's kind of what you should look at it as. But yeah, I could not come up with the modern equivalent. Maybe because I'm not in it, so I would.
You're not in the ends. Yeah, you need to move up in society, Troy.
That's what it is.
But again, so he didn't seem to have much success though, because of his attention that he had to give his family, kind of picking up the slack as one of the men of the house. But he did eventually end up sending his son there, so he must have had a positive experience with it. He must have thought it was still worthwhile to get in that business networking in the inns.
In the inns. Around this time, if you listener are in the inns, let us know how's that going.
Do they still exist? Is that still a thing? Surely not.
I feel like all the English stuff. Boy, we've had a couple episodes on England lately, and I feel like I don't sound very smart when I talk.
We don't
about
know
England.
a lot. We're sorry.
But I feel like all the English stuff is kind of still around. It's just, is it actually effective or not? But I feel like they all have. I feel like all this stuff is still in place. Let me know. Around this time, he gets married. Him and Elizabeth Cromwell have 9 children, 4 of which he outlives. But only one of them died as a kid. The others were adults when they died. I don't know that makes it much better if you outlive your adult child. But anyway, just something that's very common throughout that era. But how much does that affect you? Like if you're leading the nation and your son dies, are your decisions that you're making, for the next month, are they going to be good ones? You're still leading the nation. And I think at least 1 or 2 of those happen while he's in big positions of leadership. So there's just something to think about how that would impact you as you go. Elizabeth's dad was a wealthy and important merchant who knows a lot of people that will be important for connecting Oliver with the upcoming revolution. So this marriage actually ends up being a bigger networking opportunity than anything else. I'm sure he liked Elizabeth. He had 9 kids with her, but still, this is where he kind of starts his moment. It's a bit of mystery what made him become suddenly very religious. He became very Puritan-minded. In the mid-1620s or so, he wrote a letter to an Arminian minister, and during that time, he was still kind of undecided, at least on the idea of Calvinism versus Arminianism. Like the Arminian minister, he was kind of talking to him through some questions on stuff. So, but somewhere between the 1620s and 1630s, he becomes very firm. And we know some vague things that happen to him. He seems to have some kind of physical event occurs because he ends up going to the doctor a lot during this time. But the medicines and stuff that he's prescribing, at least the historian stuff I was looking at, said that it seemed to be both the kind of medicines you would get for an illness, but also the kind of medicines, there were some other medicines in there that were like the antidepressants of their day. Like he seemed depressed, and these would help him feel less so. So then, was he physically injured and that led to depression? Was it unrelated? Were these just he happened to be sick, but also he happened to be kind of going through a hard time? And was there some reason he was going through a hard time? Like, was there marital problems? Was there something else? And then another aspect of things, he gets elected to Parliament, and Parliament, I think, gets dissolved not too long after he gets elected there. But that's unrelated. But then he seems to get into some kind of trouble. And we don't know what it is, but he gets kind of brought before a council. It becomes a big deal. And it looks like he has to sell off a bunch of his land to fix this situation that we don't really know what the situation was. Was he, stealing money and got caught? I don't want to put that on him. It doesn't say anything like that. So I'm just trying to think of what kind of situation you would be in where you're a parliament person and then you're brought before a council and have to sell your lands. I just don't know what that would, I don't know enough about the 1600s to know what would require that. So he sells his land and ends up like running a farmstead. And this is just a huge social down. Like you really dropped in society by becoming like a basic farmer. Yet this is the moment around the same time when he has a spiritual transformation. He's writing a letter to somebody at the time, and he says, like, I'm the chief of sinners, and that this is around the same. He says, I joined recently the congregation of the firstborn. So whatever he's going through, illness, depression, whatever, and he's in his mid to late 30s at this point. He might actually be almost 40 years old, but he seems to be converted through this, or maybe it's unrelated. Maybe all these bad things are happening, but at the same time he was reading his Bible, or maybe all these bad things are happening, but they turned him to the Bible. I wish I had a better answer. It was unclear. But his letters show that he starts quoting the Bible a whole lot. He starts like in his letters to cousins and family, he's suddenly, adding religious thoughts and like sharing his thoughts on God. He starts writing things like Catholics are causing the problems. The Reformation didn't go far enough. So he's suddenly taking the religious side of his life very, very seriously at nearly 40 years old. He attempted to immigrate to join the Puritans, at some point in this process. And we know the year was 1634, but that's actually a few years before like most of his conversion stuff happened. So I don't know if it was like the beginning of it or an unrelated incident. So he's going to go join the Puritans. That's very much a religious thing. Like they're trying to build a new country over in the New World. So you knew if you were joining them, you were joining like a very Christian movement. However, the government did not grant him permission to go. They were saying, no, we don't think you should leave England. And I also don't know how that process worked. Was that just like visa paperwork didn't work out? Was he seen as like a risk of some kind? Did every person have to ask the English government before they went to the New World? Or was it specific to like, more aristocratic people like Cromwell? And was that why they said no? Because we're like, we already have too many aristocrats going over there. Or was it specific to Cromwell? Like he doesn't seem like he'd fit in over there. I don't know. No answers to any of those many questions, but it would probably be helpful to understanding his life if I did have those answers.
By 1638, he was fully convinced that testing things against what man says is worthless and that you should only be guided by the Bible. There's one historian that says of him, quote, if England had never had a civil war, he'd probably be an obscured, well-liked neighborhood politician who did his best and spoke against the Catholic Church sometimes. Probably, all in all, a pretty popular, well-known fellow in his neighborhood, but not much else, end quote. But he was elected to Parliament again, and during their contentious times, eventually, Parliament and the king would end up going to war. And despite not having any background in the military, Cromwell flew through the ranks and performed military extremely well. He started leading a small group of cavalry, which stopped an important silver shipment that the king needed. Again, so this is during a civil war, so Parliament is actively in conflict with the king of England at this time. Within 3 years, he'd be the second in command to the parliamentarian army. The first civil war ended, but the king tried to rise up again and failed in negotiations, which led to a second civil war in England. And this time, Cromwell was the top dog. He was the peak leader, solo leader. We often, Troy, when we talk about the Civil War, we often just kind of refer to it as like one big civil war. But I guess there's sub-wars within the English Civil War.
We try to avoid this topic on our show, if we're honest, because it is a confusing, messy topic. Maybe it's not if you were raised in England or you just love civil wars, but at least for me, a guy who loves church history and pastors doing great things and missionaries and stuff like that, when I look at the English Civil War, it just looks like a very confusing subject as how things got from point A to point B on that. He did a good job. For example, in one battle, Cromwell has 9,000 men, but they end up beating an army literally twice their size. Things like that are pretty good. And in his letters and stuff, he uses a lot of Bible imagery. And it's funny because you read these secular historians who are reading this and they're like, fascinatingly, he compares himself to the Bible, or he uses Psalms and he thinks that those have anything to do with him. And I'm like, anybody, like, it's just funny. I don't know. Maybe that's an aside you can't relate to. I don't know if that's something for all of us, but I just get a crack out of these like secular historians being like, he sent letters saying this battle reminded him of Gideon versus the Moabites. What a strange phenomena. And I'm like, any Christian who led an army in a battle against people like twice his size would be like, whoa, it felt biblical. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's some obscure, hard to understand phenomena. Like, he's quoting Psalms saying like the Lord protects his people in battle. Is there any Christian who wouldn't do that kind of thing? You know, who would be like, yeah, that was cool. Anyway, I'm not going to quote any Bibles. I don't know. When I meet Christians going through hard times, we share Bible quotes with each other, and we compare ourselves to situations in the Bible, not because we think we're those exact people, but because, like, yeah, that's what you do, right? You get comfort from the Word, and that's what Cromwell seems to be doing. But these secular historians are trying to analyze it on some deep, like, does he think he's Gideon? He's relating to this. It's like, no, you're so... Anyway, I don't know. I got a kick out of reading some of those. When Cromwell returned people in Parliament were determining what to do with King Charles. Oliver was on the side of execution. Now this is a verse I think might be out of context here. Numbers 35:33, which says, "The land cannot be cleansed of blood that is shed inside of it, but by the blood of him who sheds it." And him and some other people made the case that King Charles has rebelled, has refused peace, has, when given the chance, risen army after army to stop this country from moving on. He's the reason there is blood. Execute King Charles, and there will be peace. You know, there were lots of Christians at the time who said, no, can't execute our king. Romans 13, submit to government, all those kinds of things. But there were also Christians who said, no, this guy is a bad king. And like, what do you do with a bad criminal? You execute them. That was what you did with them back then. And there were non-Christians on both of these sides too. A very complicated issue. He was like, the military had to sign off on it, and none of the military present at the day wanted to they were going to be a part of the execution, but they didn't want to put their signature on it. And so they had to like bring Oliver Cromwell over, and they were like, hey, can you sign this? And apparently he was with a couple people, and he grabbed that pen and signed it so fast. It was like, yeah, absolutely. I will happily slap my signature on this, kill this guy. So Oliver Cromwell did not think highly of King Charles, and he was more than happy to sign off on his execution, and he did.
So we are not even, scratching the surface of Cromwell's life. He has a whole lot that went on in the years that he was interacting with government. But what we'll touch on here is that he was highly influential in founding the Commonwealth. And when he was asked to lead it, he struggled. He really didn't like the term king. He agonized over the name. He preferred the title Lord Protectorate, which, you know, that is a pretty cool name. If I had to pick a title, Lord Protectorate or King,
it kind of like almost like I couldn't possibly be your king because I'm too busy being your supreme leader. Oh, not quite, but it is a little bit like, wait, that almost sounds like a better name than king. But he really was trying to disassociate the idea. Don't make me a royal family line. Like, I'm not a king. Right. I'm the Lord Protector.
Yeah, he did not want to give any illusion that there was a new royal line. He wanted England to be something completely different. The Commonwealth was supposed to be a republic ruled not by a king, but by Parliament. And it was supposed to create a better Christian government than the ones that had come before it, caused partially by the king ignoring Parliament for several years leading up to that. He's often kind of described as, like today, retrospectively, described as someone that's dour and humorless. But, if you read accounts, he seems energetic. Like, he's a fan of dancing and music. He loved horse racing. He was often out at the horse racing tracks. He did struggle with, seasonal depression. So maybe that's where some of the dour reputation comes from. But I think kind of painting him with a humorless dour brush is a bit extreme there. And, broad generalizations in general, not great. He has some famous phrases that supposedly he's known for. I've heard a few. So he's there's a few honest men are better than numbers. I've heard that one. Keeping your powder dry. I suppose
I've never heard that one.
It makes sense. You don't want I'm presumably we're talking about
that was the
gunpowder.
first one I was like, oh, I definitely have heard keeping your powder dry. Like that one, I was like that one for sure. I was surprised. Maybe I don't know. I thought that was the more famous of the ones he said.
A Few Honest Men, I feel like, has got to be the most famous.
That
have
was
you
the
heard-
one I actually was least familiar with. I was like, I don't.
So
is
you've
that-
heard
I-
of warts and all? I've never heard anyone
Yeah.
say warts and all.
Oh yeah, for sure. So like he was getting a painting done, and the person doing the painting was, I guess, like applying the ancient version of a filter. It was like kind of making him look a little more handsome.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, paint me as I am, warts and all. And that's like a very famous phrase, like, take it as it is, warts and all. You've never heard that? That's well, there
It's
you
a
go.
great
Which
quote.
of
Now that you've explained it, I love it. I love the
Yeah.
context. I've never heard it a day in my life.
Okay, well, now I'm curious which of the famous quotes by Cromwell are you familiar with? Because I thought the one that I wasn't even sure if I would even put on there was "A few honest men are better than numbers," because that was the one I was like, I don't know, I've never heard anybody say that before. So there you go. I guess these are famous quotes, but maybe your mileage varies on which ones you know better than others. And keeping your powder dry, if you're not familiar with that phrase, it's about muskets. Like, don't fire so back and then you kind of load your powder and the stuff and keep it ready and stuff like that for battle. So don't use it before you're sure you need to actually use it. So if there's like a conflict and you decide to avoid it, you were keeping your powder dry, so you didn't kind of like jump into the fight.
Well, are you sure? Are you sure it just doesn't have to do with like getting rain on in your gunpowder supply?
No. Okay, I googled it to make sure because I got nervous.
Okay, I mean I don't know. I'm just assuming.
Yeah. To remain calm and patient before acting prematurely. So yeah, it's a wait and see approach, not using your gunpowder before it's
Okay.
ready. We are keeping some powder dry in case the market falls again, something like that. Okay, good. I was wondering. I was like, wait, what if it has to do with like leaving
Keep
your
it
powder out in the
stored.
rain?
Keep it preserved. Yeah.
The original was trust in God and keep your powder dry. Your powder dry before Cromwell. That is kind of like a tongue twister there. Was telling the soldiers that as they were crossing a river to fight in Ireland. And basically, he was telling them to trust in God and keep patient. So literally, their powder was going to get wet,
Yeah,
but it became a phrase. But it became a phrase people used to mean keep your cool. Don't waste your powder on something before. So there you go. Like if they had tried to start shooting them from the river, I guess. Well, there you go, everybody. The famous 3 phrases by Cromwell. Yeah, that's funny. I don't know the origins of "A few honest men are better than numbers," but I think that one's pretty
So
explanatory.
you see, there were oftentimes dishonest men that were.
For example,
about, so.
there you go. He had 9,000 men against 18,000, but his 9,000 were more honest.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if that's true. Okay. The reality of Cromwell, was he a military-backed dictatorship like some people see him? Was he? Did he enforce Puritan morality? Like all these things are going on. He wanted to create a republic, but many people, at least today, say it was more dictator-y than republic-y. But I mean, he went. We skipped so many things. Like he went to the war with the Dutch and won, and that was very popular because beating your local enemies makes you quite a popular leader. They tried to enforce Puritan morality. They did a bunch of different things. But when Cromwell dies, he's like, it's expected to hand off to his son, even though it's not supposed to be a kingdom. The next Lord Protectorate up was his son, but his son just didn't have it. He didn't have that same spirit. He wasn't the great leader his dad was, and he wasn't able to establish himself as the Lord Protectorate. We cover all of these events in a great episode of a deep dive called The London Fire of 1666. So if you want to hear the story of how King Charles II comes back to the throne, how a fire wipes out England, how we have to ask the question of, was God mad at Britain because of a black plague, a tornado, a war, a fire, and like 1,000 other things that went wrong in England in that year of 1666 that made English people wonder if God was ending the world on them. And then a long, crazy story that led to a Catholic conspiracy trying to take over the country. Anyway, go listen to that deep dive. It fills you in on more details there. With all of that, it's difficult timeline to cover. We didn't even get to stuff. Like anybody listening is gonna be like, you're not gonna, and they know the story. You're not gonna talk about Cromwell in Ireland and all the stuff that happened there. No, we don't really have time. That led to an invasion of Ireland. A lot of Irish people died. Sometimes people say 15 to 50% of Irish population. One of the policies they had was no quartering. If a person surrendered, they still killed him. That's kind of condemnable actions. However, the reverse of that, some modern historians say that was actually pretty common practice in Europe at the time, and that it wouldn't have been seen as actually that extreme. If you compare it to the 40 Years' War, it's pretty similar to what they were doing there. it was kind of like the idea of if you destroy the city entirely, other cities will surrender quicker, saving more lives in the long run. Kind of like a Hiroshima situation, drop the bomb, kills a lot of people, but the war ends. That's at least what some modern historians say. Other people say Cromwell was a terrible dictator and he was killing these people because what do you do? It's very controversial. I'm not going to give opinions on all of that. I'm just giving you this information so you at least know a little bit about it. But I will say, all of those things aside, I don't think too many people doubt whether Cromwell was attempting to do things from at least what he thought was a biblical perspective. And I don't think too many people would also argue that this was a very complicated era in England's history, and there were a lot of topsy-turviness. And if you're not sure, just pull out the Oliver Cromwell Wikipedia page and give that a look. You're going to get turned upside down trying to figure out which way's up and down on that story. With all that said, he tried to use the Bible, and he saw England in a perilous state. Things were going poorly for the Protestant movement, at least from what they knew. And he was trying to encourage England to stick with God before the lights in England and in Europe went out.
My lords and gentlemen of the two houses of Parliament, where the legislative power of these nations rests, the weight of the matters and interests that I have brought us together presses so heavily upon me that I could not, in good conscience, remain silent. I feel compelled to lay before you my concerns about the present state of these nations. I will also give you some of the remedies which have come to me. I believe the well-being, yes, the very existence of these nations is at stake. If God blesses this meeting, our peace and stability may yet be prolonged. If not, then by the time I have finished speaking, I ask you to consider whether there is, humanly speaking, any possibility of fulfilling the trust that lies upon us for the safety and preservations of these nations. Once I have spoken what is on my mind, I will leave the effects of my words to God Almighty to work upon your hearts as He sees fit. I see it as the great duty of my position to stand, as it were, on a watchtower, to look out for what may be the good of these nations and what may prevent their harm, so that, through the counsel of so wise and weighty a body as this council, which carries within it the very life and spirit of these nations, that good may be secured and that evil, whatever form it takes, may be averted. Yet, we wouldn't dare set our shoulders to this work unless it pleased God to impress upon our hearts a deep conviction that this moment calls for our most serious thought and our best counsel. I have not prepared a carefully crafted speech or followed any set pattern of rhetorical arguments, and maybe I should have done that, and it might have helped you understand me more clearly. But instead, I will speak to you directly and honestly, sharing only those thoughts that God has been pleased to place upon my heart. We have now been in the form of government for more than 4 years, and we are not so inexperienced that we should not understand what issues most deeply concerns us. The dangers you face, and this is the central focus of my speech, come from two places: from affairs abroad and their difficulties, and from affairs at home and their difficulties. You have now arrived at the end of the challenges and hardships as great as I believe any nation has ever endured. I originally planned to structure my remarks like this: first, to show you what threatens your very existence, and then what threatens your well-being. But when I thought more carefully about it, I realized, given the present state of things, everything comes down to existence itself. You are not truly a nation, and you will not remain one unless God gives you the strength to face the evils now surrounding us. Let me begin with the dangers abroad. What, I ask you, is the situation beyond our borders? I once believed that the public profession of the Protestant religion was a matter of national well-being. There is some truth to it, But that's not all there is. However great and important it is, it still belongs to the category of well-being rather than sheer survival. A nation can, after all, continue to exist even without Protestantism. But when you consider this issue fully, taking into account all its complexities, everything bound up with it, and the condition of other nations, I believe that anyone who looks honestly at the state of Protestant causes throughout Christendom must admit this: the great question now unfolding, compared to what all other questions are of lesser importance, is whether the Christian world will become entirely subject to popery, or whether God has shown love towards the shared interest of Protestant Christians everywhere. For anyone who attacks even one part, a whole, in order to destroy it, ultimately attacks the whole itself. Well, it isn't true today that the Protestant cause and interest abroad is under attack, and that in our minds of many, it has been completely crushed and trampled down. I asked you to consider this with me for a moment and judge for yourselves whether this is so. We have long known that the Protestant cause has been regarded as the true religion of this nation, but it won't be destroyed at all once, but gradually, so that it might be eaten away quietly, like a hidden disease, until it was finally withered, just as Jonah's gourd withered away without warning. For this much is certain: the papacy and those who support it have openly and boldly trampled God's people underfoot for the simple reason that they are Protestants. Let's look at some examples. Look at how the House of Austria, on both sides of Europe, in Austria itself and in Spain, we see their kingdoms arming and preparing to destroy the entire Protestant interest. Or let us consider the King of Hungary with his supporters. He seeks to make himself Emperor of Germany. In the judgment of many, this is not just a possibility, but almost a certainty. Who then will be able to challenge him from abroad and prevent him from taking the Empire of Germany entirely into his hands? Is he not the son of a father whose principles, political interest, and personal conscience led him to drive all Protestants out of his inherited lands? Didn't his father drive Protestants out of Bohemia, which he won by the sword, and out of Moravia and Silesia as well? And this is not merely history. We receive daily reports, some of them repeated to us again within just the past 2 or 3 days, brought by godly ministers from this very city, that Protestants are being driven out of Poland into the empire, and from there forced to wander wherever they can find a piece of bread. Many are on the verge of starving. And what should we say about the other side of Europe? Italy, if I may rightly call it that, along with Spain and the surrounding regions, including Grisons and Piedmonte, and the Swiss? What are they all now but prey to Spanish power and influence? And look at the one who calls himself the so-called head of all this, a pope well-suited, perhaps even trained his whole life, for the completion of this bloody work. All this so that he may fill his cup to the brim and make himself ripe for judgment. He acts as popes have always acted. He stirs up all powers and princes of Europe towards this very goal, the rooting out of Protestants. And no one does it more effectively than the present man for the job. So I ask you, what is there across all of Europe that this moment except a shared agreement, a coordinated effort among the popish powers to suppress everything that stands in its way? But someone may say, well, these things are far away, at the edge of the world. What do they have to do with us? If they mean nothing to you, then let them mean nothing to you. But I tell you firmly, they mean something to you. They concern your faith, and they concern all the true and lasting interests of England. I have, thank God, thought seriously about this, and I ask you to consider it with me for a moment. What resistance is likely to be made against this powerful tide that now seems to be sweeping in from every direction against Protestantism everywhere? Who is there that still stands firm to oppose this danger? There is only one man, a poor prince. Poor indeed, yet in courage and personal character he is as brave, and I truly believe as good a man as any this age has produced. He has risked everything in standing against the popish interest in Poland, and he secured those gains for the Protestant religions there. And now the Catholics have pushed him into a corner. What adds to this grief, more painful than anything I have said so far, and I wish with all my heart it were not so, is that men of our own faith have forgotten this and are now seeking his downfall. I beg you, think carefully about the consequences of all of this. What does it all mean? Is it merely noise and confusion, or does it also carry a clear and deliberate message? Those who are not faithful to the religion they claim to profess, though we profess it, I am convinced, with more honesty and sincerity than any people so closely united anywhere in the world, God will surely uncover them. I ask you again to consider how all these things work together. Ask yourself, does this appear to be just a threat to your comforts? No, it is a threat to your very existence. This scheme, this coordinated design against the Protestant cause is made all the more dangerous because many Protestants themselves are not as faithful or clear-minded as they need to be. If they succeed in shutting us out from the Baltic Sea and making themselves master of it, where will your trade be? Where will you obtain the materials needed to maintain your ships? How will you claim any rightful power at sea or defend yourselves against a foreign invasion on your own land? When you think about it carefully, you can see this is intentional. I truly believe that if you were to ask the ordinary sailor moving from ship to ship, you would rarely find one who would not tell you openly that this plan is aimed directly at you. It is so obvious, both from this and from many other signs, that you are the target. And in my conscience, I know no other reason for this except the purity of the faith practiced among you, a people who have not yet made it their habit to put profit before godliness, but who still believe that godliness itself is the greater gain. But suppose it were to happen, given that the way things now stand, that you are unable to defeat yourself against all who may rise against you. I will name no specific nation here, even though I know you are thinking of the Dutch. But it is not just them, for everyone knows that many countries are involved in this alliance with the Catholics. Then judge for yourselves where you would stand. You have long thought yourself secure, surrounded as you are by the sea, separated from the rest of the world by a great natural barrier. But in truth, you will not be able to protect either your waters or your ships unless you are prepared to turn your ships into cavalry and your sailors into soldiers and to fight for your safety on land itself. Having laid these things before you, I have done my duty. And if there truly is no danger in all of this, then I am content. I have spoken openly. It is now for you to judge whether there is danger or not. If you decide that this is a time for ease and for comfort, that you may debate endlessly, argue for days and weeks over forms and titles, over whether one house should exist or another, over whether questions should even be put to a vote, if you choose to fill the air with empty arguments saying aye or no, while lacking any real sense of the moment, then I have this comfort before God. At least I warned you. But let me warn you even more directly. Were it not for the fact that France presently serves as a counterweight against the hostile power, if an alliance can be found across Catholic Europe between the powers and France, then England would immediately become the chief target of the fury and hatred of all the enemies of God and of all religion throughout the world. I accuse no one directly, but look across the water. You have neighbors there, some with whom you are at least with peace, and others you have shown open hostility towards you. You know this well, and I would rather have you trust your declared enemy, at least trusting that he truly intends your harm, than place confidence in certain friends who may be bound to you by alliance, yet cannot be relied upon. I could support all this with specific examples. Indeed, I easily could. For you know well that your enemies today are the same enemies that you have had since the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Enemies who have openly and consistently sought your destruction, and they have no lack of plans, wisdom, or determination to wipe you from the face of the earth. And when open attacks, Spanish armadas and the like, failed to destroy you, they turned to other methods. Through Jesuits and other agents, they laid secret plans to disturb and weaken our government, even to the point of taking the lives of those they believed were essential to preserving the peace and stability of this nation. Do you remember Guy Fawkes and his secret plan? I can list several others. Do you think they have stopped attempting these kinds of plans? In those early days, the Dutch needed Queen Elizabeth, of blessed memory, for their protection, and they received it. I hope they will never repay that kindness poorly. For if they forget either the help that was given to them, which was truly their safety, or the sincere desire that nation has longed to live at peace with them, well, for my part, I don't think God rewards those who act without gratitude. Indeed, they cannot prosper unless God and his truth are nothing more than market gossip. But let this at least awaken you. It is certain that they, the Dutch, have openly embraced a principle which, thanks be to God, we have never had ourselves. They sell weapons to their enemies. They will lend ships to their enemies, and they do this openly. That principle is not in dispute, nor are we here to argue with them about it. I ask only that you weigh these facts carefully and let them have their proper effect on your judgment. We know without a doubt that this principle of theirs is real. I assure you of it. And I believe that if you were to inquire at the exchange here in London, you would learn as clearly as you could wish that they had hired ships to transport 4,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry against you not even that long ago. And I say this not to stir suspicion for its own sake, not to push any harmful agenda, but for one purpose only, that you may awaken to the true understanding of the danger you are in. I have never, I hope, and I never will, used manipulation to persuade you to give money for our defense. But if money is needed, I will speak and say so. Help us with the resources required so that the interest of this nation may be defended, both abroad and at home. I will use no elaborate arguments, and in doing so, I will frustrate the schemes of wicked men abroad who claim that all of this is really about money. Before I finish, you will find that I speak to you very openly, and I do so with genuine love, affection, and faithfulness towards you and towards these nations. If this is your state of affairs abroad, then I ask you to consider, even briefly, the condition of your affairs at home. And if thinking about both foreign dangers and domestic troubles leads you at least to serious and honest reflection, then let God move your hearts to do whatever is truly owed to this nation as he sees fit. As for myself, I will not be anxious or manipulative. I will look to him who has been my God and my guide up to this point. I urge you then to look closely at your own situation at home. I am convinced that you are all honest and worthy men, and that there is not one among you who does not want to be known as a true patriot. I know that you do. We sometimes take pride in being Englishmen, and rightly so, for it is no shame to be English. But that pride should move us to act like Englishmen, to seek the real, good, and true interests of this nation. So what then is our condition at home? I confess I scarcely know where to begin or where to end. Yet no matter where one begins, he will quickly find himself facing the same problem I am describing. We are overflowing with troubles and deeply divided in spirit, as much as any people could be. Yet by a wonderful, astonishing, and never sufficiently praised providence of God, we are still at peace. After all the fighting we have endured and all the victories we have seen, yes, we who sit here today are a marvel to the world. Given the state of our hearts and minds, or rather our disorder, it is nothing short of a miracle that we have returned to peace at all. And whoever seeks to shatter that peace, may God Almighty uproot that person from this nation. And he will do it, no matter what excuses or justifications are offered. Those who want to break the peace, do they truly understand what they are driving this nation towards? They need to. Anyone who does not consider the pregnant woman, the nursing children of this nation, those who do not yet know their right hand from their left, and of whom this city may be said to be as full as Nineveh once was, anyone who does not consider them, nor the future generations that will come from those now living, must have the heart of a Cain. Cain was marked, made an enemy of all men, and all men his enemies. And the wrath and justice of God will pursue such a man to his grave, if not beyond it. I say, look at this nation. Look closely. Consider the many different interests within it, if they are even deserved to be called interest. Were it not for God's restraining hand, they would collapse into complete chaos. We would face another civil war, bloodier than any we have yet endured. For I ask you, what is the general spirit of this nation right now? Isn't it that every group of people, whether divided by religion or by politics, longs to be on top? Is this not our misery? That each group desires power for itself, convinced that it would use that power for well, if only it held it. Every faction wants control. That alone should give us pause. It would be a happy thing if this nation were willing to be governed at all, willing to accept rule, even if only in civil matters, and even under rules who govern poorly. For bad government is better than no government, and misrule is better than complete disorder. But that is not all. We are restless. We crave constant change. We are not content merely to open wounds. We insist on tearing them wider. It is as if you were to see someone cutting wounds into a man's side and then eagerly digging and probing those wounds with his fingers. That is what such men are bent on doing. That is the spirit of those who would trample on people's spiritual liberties. They are forever making wounds, tearing, ripping, and widening them far beyond what they were before. Isn't this clearly what they are doing? I do not speak of sex in a harsh sense, but in the nation is heavily made upon them. And what is it that prevents these things from being carried out to the fullest extent? Nothing, except that these men have more anger than strength. They lack the power to achieve their aims. That is the only thing missing. And I ask you to consider what our enemies abroad are doing while we are fighting amongst ourselves. We are disputing with one another while the hostile Catholic party are themselves united. What do you think will be the outcome? This is now how things stand. This is the reality. And consider what proof we have already seen in the spirits of these men. We have recently seized banners, painted ones and printed ones with elaborate displays behind them, calling people to take up arms. Men are urged, each group in its own way, to fight for its particular beliefs, each convinced that it must settle matters by the sword, and each believing that it marches under the banner of Christ simply by committing itself to such a cause. Now consider what a terrible and dangerous situation this puts our poor nation in. This is truly the state we are in. And the danger is not only in what these men might do on their own. Some of them, yes, some of them care little who carries the prize in the end. Many of you know how spies have been found and even led to killing. And what is your defense? What prevents all of this from breaking upon you and destroying you utterly? Simply this, that you still have an army in Scotland, in England, and in Ireland. Take that away, and would not all these competing interests rush violently at us? I know you are reasonable and thoughtful men. What would prevent this nation from becoming the potter's field, a field of blood, if this army did not? Give the glory to God. For without it, all that has been spoken of would return upon us as a plague. It is this that keeps the nation in peace and quiet. And what then is the condition of your army? It is a poor, an unpaid army, soldiers walking barefoot throughout the city in this weather. And yet they remain a peaceful people, willing to serve you with their very lives. They count their hardships, dangers, and sacrifices as well spent, so long as they obey their officers and serve you in preserving the peace of these nations. A man would need a heart as cold as winter itself not to feel the weight of this. Therefore, all I can say to you is this: it will be your wisdom, and I believe your justice, to hold this responsibility firmly in your hands. And so, if you judge that all of this is still not an argument enough to awaken you to a sense of your danger, a danger which every consideration apart from the simple goodwill and common sense alone ought to impress upon the hardest hearts, then allow us at least to think seriously about this. What will become of us if our spirits turn the wrong way? If dissatisfaction takes hold, what will follow? You have an army 5 or 6 months behind in pay. You have another army in Scotland nearly as far behind, and one in Ireland even more so. And what of Scotland? Has it long enjoyed stability? Have its troubles faded so quickly? Have they not felt poverty just as sharply? I speak plainly and honestly. I truly believe the Scottish nation has suffered as much in outward livelihood and lack of food as any of the people I have so far mentioned. I believe they are, in truth, a deeply ruined nation, torn apart by nearly 20 years of continuous war, foreign and internal, against themselves and against others. Yet even so, there is hope. I have spoken with gentlemen who have recently come from there, and it has pleased God to give real encouragement to the poorer sort among them. And I must say this: if it pleases God to continue that encouragement, the common people of Scotland will live as well, and are likely to thrive as much under your government as they ever did under their own great lords who forced them to labor for their living no better than the peasants of France. I am reluctant to say anything that might reflect poorly on that nation, for it is true that the middle class there is growing into a level of stability that makes their lives comfortable, if not better than they were before. But if, after all this, we still fail to recognize the schemes being currently carried out among us, the plans constantly stirred up from Flanders and Spain, while at the same time viewing ourselves as a deeply divided people, then where, I ask, is there any real stability to be found in England at all? Truly, there is no stability anywhere worthy of the name, no true unity, except in this very body assembled here. How can anyone lay a hand on his heart and seriously spend time arguing over this matter, over constitutional roots, over one house or another, over structures that can be proved neither by scripture nor by reason, while keeping one another away from forcing these pressing realities, these matters that lie plainly before us? I will leave these things to you. I commit them to your conscience. They carry weight, greater weight than anything I have yet placed before you, whether concerning dangers abroad or troubles at home. For this is our condition. If our very existence is threatened both at home and abroad, then our comfort is hardly worth mentioning by compassion. If because we fail to uphold our honor at sea and neglect and maintain our defense at home, we expose ourselves to such dangers, and if through our own error we allow ourselves to be distracted from these realities, arguing over secondary matters and quarreling over details instead of committing ourselves fully, heart and soul, to what truly must be done, then I can foresee only one outcome. It will be exactly as the one foolish books describe, a man who, after counseling every possible position, commits himself to none, neither fifth monarchy, nor presbytery, nor independency, until he finally declares himself for no other political system except orderly confusion. And there are men among us who have sadly lost both conscience and reason, men who cannot say what they want, yet are eager to stir unrest and kindle conflict among others. Now, having said all this, I have done my duty to God and to you in setting these things plainly before you. I speak not as a commentator. My purpose was to demonstrate the reality of the threat from abroad and the unresolved and restless spirit of the enemies at home, men who, from the first day of our peace until now, have never ceased trying to ignite unrest among us. If these things are true, and I truly believe that they are, then I pray that God would impress them deeply upon your hearts. I pray that he would give you one heart and one mind to carry forward the work for which you gathered here. For if these dangers are real, then even if you were to meet tomorrow and agree fully on everything necessary for your preservation, your rights, and your liberties, it may already be feared that too much time has passed to fully deliver yourselves from the dangers that now hang over you. We have now had 6 years of peace after an interruption of 10 years of war. We have seen, heard, and felt the evils of war. And now God has given us a fresh taste of the blessings of peace. Haven't you been experiencing such peace in England, Ireland, and Scotland, where not one person has raised a finger to disturb you? What a mighty blessing from the Lord of heaven! Will we now waste our time? Should we ourselves listen to delusions that would break and disrupt this peace? There is not a single man who has truly been faithful to this cause, as I believe all of you have been, who cannot accept anything but the greatest tearing apart and persecution this world has ever seen. I cannot understand how it can enter the heart of a man to undervalue these things, to treat peace and the gospel lightly, the greatest mercy God can give. We have peace of the gospel. What a thought! Let us be of one heart, one soul, of one mind, to uphold the honest and just rights of this nation, not merely to claim them in a way that destroys our peace and ruins the nation's itself. In a little while, that too will be gone. And then, truly, whatever we may pretend, if you plunge into another flood of blood and war, with the strength of this nation already drained by the last one, it must collapse and utterly perish. I beg you, I charge you in the name and presence of God and as before him to be deeply aware of these things and to take them to heart. You have a day of fasting coming. I pray that God would touch your hearts and open your ears to this truth, and that you would be deaf, blocking your ears to all dissension, and that you would look upon those who would sow discord, whoever they may be. As Paul says to the church in Corinth, as I recall, mark those who cause division and offense, those who would unsettle you from the foundations of peace upon which you now stand under any pretense whatsoever. I will conclude with this. At our last meeting, I freely told you that I would speak on a psalm, and I did so. I am not ashamed of it at any time, especially when I meet with men of such weight and importance as you. There is one verse there that I omitted. I will hear what God, the Lord, will speak, for he will speak peace to his people and to his saints, but let them not turn again to folly. Dissension, division, destruction is a poor nation, torn by civil war, suffering all the consequences of civil war. If we return again to folly, let every man consider whether that is not the same as turning towards destruction. If God should unite our hearts and bless you, granting you unity and love for one another, and subdue everything that rises up in your hearts and seeks to deceive your own soul with pretext of this cause or that, as we have been saying, and you do not place the keeping of peace above all else, so that we might see the fruit of righteousness in those who love peace and embrace peace, then it will be said of this poor nation, actum est d'Anglie. It is all over with England. But I trust that God will never abandon it to such a spirit. And while I live and am able, I will be ready. Courage, my brave one. You have only about 7 months left, and then this ugly turmoil will be finished, and your part in it will be done bravely and fruitfully for all eternity. He is honorably finished with it. He, at least, and the supreme powers will guide it further according to his will. I will be ready to stand or fall with you in the seemingly hopeful union that God has brought among you, one which I trust neither the pride nor the envy of men will be able to undo. I have taken my oath to govern according to the laws that are now established, and I trust I will fully live up to it. And know this, I do not seek this position. Who would have sought it if he could have honorably avoided it? Only very wicked creatures. The position itself is no great thing, in my judgment. When either heaven or hell stands so close behind it, a man could well do without the place. Let all men know this. Oliver Cromwell did not seek this position, but was sought out for it, led and driven to it by necessity, by divine providence, by eternal laws. I speak this before God, angels, and men. I did not seek it. You sought me for it. You brought me to it. And I took my oath to be faithful to the interests of these nations, to be faithful to the government. All these things were included in my understanding in the oath, to be faithful to this government upon which we now meet. And I trust, by the grace of God, that I have taken my oath to serve this Commonwealth on such grounds. I will indeed, I must see it carried out according to the articles of the government, that every just interest may be preserved, that a godly ministry may be upheld and not just insulted by deceiving or deceived spirits, that all men may be preserved in their rightful liberties, whether civil or spiritual. It was on this basis that I took my oath and swore to this government. And on this basis, I intend to continue administering it. And having now declared my heart and my mind to you in this matter, I have nothing more to say except to pray that God Almighty would bless you.
We have an episode by John Owen where he talks to England. I think it's it's only about 40 years after this one. He's like, John Owen's like, young men of England, here's the problem of England's times. And he goes through all the problems. And here in Oliver Cromwell's episode, he's like, these are all the problems England is facing, Europe is facing, the world is facing. And I like these episodes because honestly, isn't that what we look at today? If you just look at the news and look at all the things going on, you could very easily become overwhelmed and think, oh my goodness, oh my gracious, we have so many hard areas and so many issues and so many things, and it could feel like it's all falling apart. And you know what? It felt that way 350 years ago. It felt that way 300 years ago for John Owen. It feels that way, Cromwell thinks it's going to all fall apart soon if they don't get it together because of all the alliances of Europe and all that stuff. And it's just interesting and funny how little things have changed, right? And the world has completely shifted and been remade over and over again since Cromwell's day. But the idea that all of the good men and the good Christians of the world are under attack and it's all coming down is still a very common theme. And I find some comfort when I see the people of the past are dealing with that same struggle or dealing with that same stress that we were dealing with today. And it gives me hope that, 300 years from now, it'll still be happening because we're still going to be the same people. We're still going to be, worried that's all about to end. And we may make mistakes along the way, but we're going to keep going. And I think that it's pretty cool. It's just cool to see. I of all the things in this episode, I enjoyed that the most, of just how little we as humans have changed. We look around us and we go, oh man, it's all falling apart. Lord save us. And then 300 years later, they're going to be doing the same thing, I think, too.
Thank thank you for listening to another episode of Revived Thoughts. Today's sermon was narrated by Patrick Studebaker. We love having Patrick on. If you haven't already checked out their podcast, Cave to the Cross, definitely go and look that up. You can search Cave to the Cross on your podcast app of choice. We'll also try to remember to link it below. Go check out Patrick.
Yeah, we are extremely grateful to Patrick for many different things. He even has a spot on his website. He's read so many sermons for us. He just put a spot on his website, Sermons for Revived Thoughts, which I think is pretty cool. So go check that out. He's got lots of great content, and he's been sharing some different stuff. I am just saying, go listen. If you like, especially if you like kind of any kind of philosophy or anything like that, I really, really encourage you to go check out what he's up to, and learn some really interesting things. I just pulled up ktothecross.com, recent episode, Blind Faith of an Atheist by the great Bonson's Rebuttal. Well, I mean, how are you not listening to that? And just some great stuff. I think you'll learn a whole lot. I personally am actually always looking for good apologetics materials because I work with a lot of people who have a lot of questions about God, and I highly recommend Patrick is going to give you some deep stuff if you can go check him out. We also encourage you not only go check out Patrick and subscribe to him, but also if you could share our stuff, share our episode. I know this might be a weird one, throw Oliver Cromwell, but hey, if you have some history-loving friends, they might get a real interest in this, and you certainly will learn a lot. So check it out and share it with other people. This is Troy and Joel, and this is Revived Thoughts.